Goal, 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 goal. Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another week of a big hairy news. And the biggest question of the weekend is, Chewy, how was the work do on Thursday night? That's what everyone wants to know.
Work do was pretty good.
Yeah.
Up until when my regional manager asked me for a little demo of part of my comedy routine.
Oh.
And I immediately jumped into performance mode after a couple of drinks and told a really inappropriate joke very loud and traumatized a family at the next table over.
Oh, dear.
So that was good.
Oh, dear. Did you get a bonus or anything, though? It's funny, when you started the story about, it was all very good until my, whatever you said, regional manager asked me, and I was like, what, to go to the cupboard, go to the bathroom with him? What? It could have been so much worse.
No, it just completely said, "Oh, Chewy, you do stand-up comedy. Tell us a joke."
That's funny.
I remember a lot of my jokes are like big 20-minute long stories, so I'm like, "Oh, what's a little excerpt that I could do?" Oh, I know. And yes, it involved me shouting a particular thing that I'd overheard once, and everybody died of embarrassment and pointed out that the next table over was not particularly happy. And the children were very confused.
Very good. Well, that's what we aim to do, to confuse the children who are watching. That's what we're all about.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for being with us tonight. Looking forward to a bit of a conversation. We're going to talk Piers Morgan tonight, doing a hot take, which is utterly ridiculous. We want to talk about Christopher Luxon on News Hub. And if we get time towards the end of the show, we might have a quick look at what's happening with COVID at the moment, because they're talking, well, when I say they, some experts are talking about a fourth wave coming, which, if it's going to be around every year, I guess this is what's going to happen in winter. There's going to be a wave every year. So, yes, we shall have a look at that if we get time to today. But first of all, I thought I always spend the weekend that's just gone every year glued to 3 YouTube channels watching Coachella. I love watching Coachella live. It's 3 stages live, and we get to watch them all through our afternoon. And I just thought I'd let people know. I'm not letting people know because it's over now, but if anyone out there also had a bit of a chance to check out Coachella, it was a particularly good series, and it's just nice going from stage to stage to stage. I have 3 stages that are on there and keeping up with what's going on. Yeah, it was cool. Blackpink was amazing, and there was watching it with my kids, and it was all a good time. You ever get into it? You ever seen it? Wasn't one of your dreams to tour and watch a particular band at a particular time, like a Christmas concert somewhere or something? Or maybe
yeah, absolutely. Like, there's a band that I love called Murder by Death, and they do a concert every year in early January in the Stanley Hotel, which is where Stephen King wrote The Shining. It's not the location of the movie; it's just where the book was written. And I've wanted to go for years, and like we were like real close to doing it just as COVID hit, and now we're like, okay, well maybe this is when we go to do it. So I'm just in early days of planning that out. It should hopefully be a pretty epic trip. Never been to the States.
Nice.
So yeah, to go up into the mountains of Colorado and in the snow and that sort of thing should be
a white Christmas, bro. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, could be.
The other thing I was going to say is you're a huge fan of Ted Lasso.
Oh, I love that show.
I've just started watching this weekend Welcome to Wrexham. Have you seen it at any stage? Do you know anything about it? You've seen it?
I'm waiting for the new season.
Okay.
And I'm in the interesting position because my partner's English and sometimes really likes the football, is just avoiding anything that would tell me the real news of how that football club's going on, because I want to see the show. I want to be surprised with where the show's going. But yeah.
There was a YouTube clip that became incredibly viral over the weekend. I don't know where it will come in the show, but it was a result for the team in real life. Mm-hmm. and it wasn't like a final. I'm not trying to do spoilers or anything, but that was an incredible finish to an incredible game, and it was such an incredible finish. Like in the football games last 90 minutes. In the 96th minute, there was an incredible finish sort of thing that blew up all over the world. And after watching that clip, I fed to my algorithms. I'm like, I've been meaning to check this out for a while, and I went to have a look at it, and we're in about 5 episodes already, and it's really good. For people who don't know what it is, Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool, and McElhenney, what's his first name? Rob McElhenney from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think that's the title of the show.
Yep.
I have purchased a Tier 5 football team in the UK, and it's basically a docu-series about them owning this team and trying to get it up through the divisions. So I'm assuming the first series is really them in their first full season, and as they always say with content, it's actually not about football. It's like people who like Top Gear from back in the good old days. If you're really clever and you watched it carefully, it wasn't about cars. It was about the relationship between the three hosts. It was about three friends pissing around. That's what the show was about. That was why it was so endearing. This show is about the fans and the community, and football is kind of a path to get there. The episode I just watched was about a lead singer of the band who does the song about the Deadpool and John and Rob McElhenney having cancer. And so it shows his story. It shows him in the hospital, getting treatment. So it's really an interesting little fly on the wall documentary series, not about running a football team, but about the community around the football team. So I'm hooked completely. I'll probably go through it super quick. Welcome to Wrexham. And they're only half-hour episodes. And at this day and age, good TV that's only half an hour is pretty rare. So there's a hot take from me.
I think the thing that really kind of landed with me for that program is, they talk about the whole community, how important that football team is for the whole community in the town. And for someone like me, like, I don't follow sport. I have no real huge interest in it. But that aspect of it was really interesting. And then the thing that kind of messes me up, right, is because of the way that they're telling it, you're kind of expecting this big Hollywood underdog story. Yeah. And because it's real life, that doesn't necessarily happen.
No.
And so I'm just sitting here going, but next episode, right? It'll be fine next episode. So this is why I'm sort of blocking my ears to the actual real world.
Yeah, no, and I'm not. The thing that I saw was like, you don't know sports, but in sports often there'll be a clip that goes around the world because it was a singular amazing event in a game. It happened to be in a game from them, so that went around. Then that made me kind of think. Because then, of course, they interviewed Ryan Reynolds about the singular event, and they interviewed the person who did. And so it's been blown up over the weekend. So.
Oh, fantastic! Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, let's get into it. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, actually, do you want to mention Jack Brazil first? There's not too much we can say about this, but seeing we're in Dunedin and it's a local Dunedin situation, a very strange story. Actually, I don't seem strange to downplay it because there's like there doesn't seem to be a lot of information for people who don't know. Jack Brazil is a local Dunedin activist, former Green Party not MP candidate. Who. It's so weird. I was going to say who was shot. I don't know what that quite means. Who had a bullet enter his body, because when you say was shot, that implied someone else did it. But I'm not saying someone did or didn't, because we don't know. It's like the police are saying there's a strong line of inquiry. I don't think anyone has said. I've seen no word going out. Like my kids went to the park last night at like 9 o'clock to walk the dog, and part of me was kind of like, someone's just been shot in Dunedin. Maybe you should stay inside. But we haven't had any information that there's a manhunt going on or anything. It's all a bit weird. Although in saying all of that, really very, very happy and grateful that it seems that he's okay. He's not passed away from being shot. So bizarre little story coming out of Dunedin that we're not really going to comment too much on because we don't really know too much.
Yeah. I mean, anyone here in Otago that moves in sort of the activist space knows Jack. And yeah, I mean, this is the third firearms related incident. Not that I'm suggesting that they're linked or anything like that, but it just seems to be a real rash of firearms incidents in Dunedin at the moment. But yes, from looking at the story as it's being told at the moment, is that he's been shot in the liver.
Yeah.
and that he drove down to an anarchist cafe that's recently been set up in the middle of town here, called an ambulance, and then flagged down a car to take him to hospital. And then later on that morning, the armed defender squad raided the cafe.
It's very weird, eh?
Which just seems really, really strong. It's strange, I should say. The police have said that there's nothing to worry about. It's an isolated incident, and they're following strong lines of inquiry. And that's it. So it is really interesting to me personally, just because I know what Jack's been involved in. He's been involved in anti-fascist Altipoti. He's been involved in rallies against the anti-trans movement, and when Destiny Church were in town, that sort of thing, and obviously being very prominent in the Green movement as well. So it's certainly a story that I'll be following as their updates.
I guess being from Dunedin and having the situation happen in Dunedin, we sort of want to acknowledge it. But as I said, we don't really know too much about it. It just all seems a bit, I mean, we're not going to speculate, but if there's no manhunt, what does that say? It's like, I don't know what it says, but these are the things why it's not all making a lot of sense at the moment. But when we know, you'll probably know before us if you see it on the news, but we'll keep an eye on what's going on there. Right. So let's say a very good evening and thank you to our patrons. I also want to particularly identify Tony P. Tony P is not on our screen yet because I've had a full day of podcasting today and haven't had a chance to fix it yet. But Tony P signed up over the weekend as a coffee runner. So thank you, Tony. We just want to acknowledge you and say welcome on board. If you like the work that we do, if you want to be a part of what we do and help support us, head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And we'd love to have you there. I'm planning this weekend, I think so, on doing a meetup. Obviously, because we're all over the country, if not all over the world, the meetup is virtual. It'll be on a Zoom type platform. And if you want to be a part of that meetup, probably late Saturday morning, like 11 a.m. New Zealand time, then you need to be a patron. And if you want to be a patron, head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News, and we will see you on Saturday morning.
I might be able to attend that because I don't work on Saturdays anymore.
We should definitely jump in. That you know what will happen then? There'll be more people because they fucking love you. Me, they're not so keen on. But you, they love you. Okay, let's have a look. I'm already seeing critical words in the old chat there about Piers Morgan, but I think it's quite important that we have a look at some stuff that's been going on and some stuff that's been said over the weekend. But there's a little bit of background we need to do first of all for this story. So these three are lawmakers from Tennessee, right? All three of them. There was an event last week where they all protested within their representative house about gun violence. They weren't being able to be given the platform to say what they wanted to say, so they brought in a bullhorn, and they basically interrupted and caused it so that the House couldn't work. So they protested even though they were the lawmakers, and they were protesting that their voice wasn't being heard. Ironically, only two of these lawmakers were expelled. Can you guess which one of these is not like the other? Shows one of these things is not like the other. Which two do you think the people expelled? Which ones? You reckon?
Interesting. Yeah.
But only two of them were expelled. One of them wasn't. I mean, there's probably nothing in that, of course. But funnily enough, the two gentlemen on the right were expelled, and the lovely Caucasian lady on the left, even though they all did exactly the same thing, was not. So Tennessee, yeehaw, pew, 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 pew. But what's happened since then is both of the expelled Tennessee legislators, Representative Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, have been reinstated by the Shelby County Commissioner in Memphis, Tennessee. Tennessee lawmakers Gloria Johnson, hi Gloria, was exempt from the April 7 expulsion despite her involvement with the Tennessee Three and choosing to speak out against the lack of gun control in the state Tennessee on the House floor. So funny that, eh? I mean, I can't see it. I wouldn't know. Could you identify any difference between the three of them? I mean, I can't really see anything. Can you?
Isn't it just, it's stunning, really, when here we are in 2023 in Tennessee, or their lawmakers in Tennessee can't see the optics on this, like for so many reasons, like the gun stuff and Tennessee's history. Just it baffled me. But one thing of note is a big part of what got them back in was that enormous public response that they got.
Yeah. I think what we can also do is maybe we'll play a little bit of it's only a 2-minute clip, but it kind of gives a bit of a synopsis, and then we'll go to Piers Morgan. Now, as always, Chewy, shout out if you can't hear this. We have tested it. It should work. So there's a little bit of a 2-minute introduction as to what's happened up until a few days ago when they were reinstated.
The Nashville City Council has voted unanimously to reinstate one of the Tennessee state representatives expelled last week for joining gun violence protests. Justin Jones will serve as interim representative in the seat left vacant by his expulsion. To make his appointment permanent, he will have to run in a special election. Jones was part of a group of Democrats dubbed the Tennessee Three.
Well, just looking again, I'm trying to figure this out. What do you? I mean,
Gloria.
There's something. Is there something
that? It's escaping me.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it is. So they were expelled, which means they've lost their position, and then they were reinstated. And what that means is they have. I mean, let's think of something in New Zealand that the party removes someone from a seat, but then they get brought back into that seat, although they're not officially the member of that seat. They're sort of looking after it until the next election when they might run again. So that's sort of the equivalent of what happened. And I'm still struggling myself. Maybe someone in the chat can see it. I'm still struggling myself to see what the difference between these three are, especially the two on the right, because I can't see it.
Who faced expulsion last week for protesting on the House floor. Only Gloria Johnson survived the vote.
Yeah, weird.
Meanwhile, those protests are still taking place. Demonstrators once again gathered at the state capitol Monday to call for gun control. Mark Strassman has the latest from Nashville.
Suddenly, the so-called Tennessee Three are everywhere. In the streets of Nashville today, on television, and probably in state Republican nightmares. Former Democratic State Representative Justin Pearson and Justin Jones.
So there is no democracy in Tennessee. Tennessee is the most undemocratic state in the nation.
You don't understand.
Last week, mostly white Republicans in the Tennessee House flexed their supermajority. They expelled 2 young black lawmakers from mocking House decorum with a bullhorn and bravado.
I'm concerned about the House floor following the process and procedures that are laid out that you should follow and not having a protest, as it was described over here, on the House floor.
Jones's district included part of Nashville. And in a special session today, the city's Metro Council met to appoint an interim state rep. As expected, they named Jones in effect to replace himself until Tennessee's governor sets the date for a special election. If Republicans here hoped ousting the 2 Democrats would silence them, make them smaller,
Look at the crowd.
Backfired. GOP leadership here got smaller, and Jones and Pearson now have a national voice.
When they expelled us, they had no idea that this was going to happen.
There you go. So there's the nutshell of the situation as to where it was up to a couple of days ago. So HBO runs a show with Bill Maher called Real Time. They've just signed on, I guess because they want fewer viewers, to also simulcast on CNN. Because apparently it's like, remember Rob Muldoon said, if someone leaves New Zealand to move to Australia, the IQ goes up in both places. So it's a bit the same, that if you broadcast your show live on CNN, the number drops exponentially for both broadcasts. So they had a show this week with Katie Porter, who's a Democratic representative from California, and Piers Morgan as well. Then they do this thing afterwards. It's called Overtime. They finish the show, and then they go live to YouTube for 10, 15 minutes, because it's a live show. 10, 15 minutes, and take questions from the audience. And one of the questions was about the Tennessee Three, and was about the expulsion of the state legislators. And Piers Morgan had perhaps one of the worst hot takes in the history of hot takes there has ever been. Now remember, those representatives were legally entitled to be in that building. They'd been voted to be in that building. There's no question they broke the House rules of how they were communicating, but then they were expelled, kicked out, expelled, expulsion and expelled at the same time, and they were forced to leave. So they left, right? So that's what they did. They made a political stance based around, stopping children getting killed by guns, and the supermajority basically took their seats, their democratically elected seats, away from them. That's a pretty fair synopsis. So what's Piers Morgan's take on this? talking about these two.
And interrupted the proceedings, which, of course, when that happened on January the 6th, in a much larger and more violent way, all the people currently cheering on the two Tennessee legislators were the ones who would have been condemning and castigating what happened on January the 6th. Well,
So you didn't hear that incorrectly.
Got a response.
Yeah, you wait till you hear Katie Porter tear him a new one. He just did actually said that the interrupting the process by these two democratically elected people, he compared that to January the 6th. He actually did just do that. You're not mishearing that. And then Katie Porter, who is a actual politician, Democratic from California, lights him up.
Ones who would have been condemning and castigating what happened on January the 6th. Well,
you're not actually comparing.
No,
yeah, that's
crazy.
That's
why I said, you actually did just compare.
No, here's what I'm comparing. When you have a mob of protesters and they're going into a legislative chamber, whether it's at the Capitol or whether it's in Tennessee, the principle's the same. And if you don't have the same principle response to both of those things, regardless of scale, then you're not principled.
No, listen, the principle is different. They were Tennessee legislators who went into the chamber and admittedly broke the rules of decorum, partly because they were being silenced when they wanted to talk, following the rules of decorum, about gun violence prevention. What happened on January 6th was a bunch of batshit crazy fuckers with guns who killed police people. Piers, that is not the same.
But Katie, I, like Bill, I agree with what the legislators who were doing the protesting, I agree with them about guns. Everyone knows, I think, in fact, that's why I left CNN. It's nice to be back, by the way, on CNN. I agree with them. Thank you.
And then it comes down to him explaining how he agrees with them. It's that, I don't know if it's a trope or not, Chewy, but that whole kind of thing. You know, I agree with them. They're just not doing it the right way. They're not doing it the way that I'm sanctioning them to do it, but I agree with them.
Isn't that the same old argument when any sort of protest happens?
Yeah.
Like the same old boring argument of like, yeah, we know it's bad, and you probably got a point there, but if you could just submit this form and wait patiently for us to fix it, sometimes you just can't. And yeah, that false equivalence from Morgan is just it's like watching a stroke happen in real time.
There might have been, I'm not defending him obviously, but he might have also been referencing when there was a bunch of supporters of the three went not into the actual chamber, but into the house and sung 1960s protest songs about peace, love and moonbeams. He might have been talking about that as well, but even then, and
it's not the most threatening act known to man, is it?
Certainly not getting gallows and putting them out the front screaming hang Mike Pence. There's a bit of a disparity, and it's certainly not literally killing people in there, police officers who are there to defend the building. So, yeah, hot take zero by Piers Morgan I don't know what he was doing, actually. I don't know whether he was actually trying to find sort of a middle ground or whether he was just, thinking that these uppity young men shouldn't be doing these sorts of things. Or I'm not entirely sure how he could have gotten there and what the purpose of it was. Or he just completely had a brain fart and thought he was making a salient point and obviously completely wasn't.
So often when I'm commenting on something that Piers Morgan has done, it starts with "what the fuck." What the fuck was he thinking? What the fuck did he just say? Why the fuck did he do that? Like, that seems to be his purpose. Is just to be insane and pinball around various insane things and then backpedal and then have another crack at it.
Yeah.
Just a very weird dude.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. I've got a little thing to show because I was going to show you at the start of the show, but it's quite funny, and I'm going to have this is like a little interlude. This is the commercial interlude for our show. Did you see this clip over the weekend? Jennifer Aniston being shocked by the size of an Australian reporter.
No,
I'll play this clip. This is fantastic. You watch this. And if you can't hear it clearly, she says, "Why are you crouching?"
Lie all the way. You're late.
Crouching.
I'm such a big guy and I get in the way of the...
What are you getting in the way of? Oh, the camera. Yeah. Oh, I see.
Oh, my God. That's awful. That's not right. I can't go. Put your hat on and get out of here. Sorry I scared you there, Jen.
I can't believe
do that to Aniston. Fly all the way. You're right.
I thought you might enjoy that. Then they showed one more clip of it, of what actually happened when they moved him away. Gotta move him along.
Thanks, God.
That was great. Thank you.
That was funny. Well, Jennifer Aniston, Adam Sandler was scared by my brutish height.
That is what you call a unit.
Yeah, and it's great. The face is the best. Look at that face.
That's a huge dude.
Anyway, I'm like, we take our politics and news real seriously here in Big Hero News. Right, speaking of, let's get into it with Mr. Luxon, shall we? I have to give props to The Nation. In fact, they've done some good interviews in the last few weeks. They're an interesting outlet. It's really funny how you watch like the AM show and they bring a certain perspective or a certain, and look, I'm not, when I use the word bias, I'm not actually criticizing them for it because we all have it, but they bring that to the show and you kind of start to think, well, is this what News Hub really is? Their Saturday morning show actually is doing some quite interesting things and some quite interesting longer interviews. I'm quite impressed.
I mean, that's the thing that we've been talking about for a while, right? Is the lack of long form interviews, and I was kind of surprised to see it pop up. I was like, oh, it'll be a little wee brief segment with Luxon, and where it's just under half an hour, covers a whole range of topics. 22 minutes. Yeah. And a lot of it was actually, and Chewy, you weren't here on Thursday, I don't know where you were, out gallivanting, was talking about his leadership. We're going to have a look at a bit of that. And what I don't have, maybe I'll bring it up whilst this first clip is playing, is the Courier poll from last week. One of the questions they asked about, and it was quite interesting, there was like 6 categories. I will go find it because I'll get it wrong. But one of the categories, the respondents were asked about leadership, National versus Labour, and Labour won it massively. So the people responding said Labour for leadership much more than National, and I think it's resonated by these questions that are going on. So let's have a look at this. So this is about a 2.5 minute clip, the first start of it. We can stop as we're going through it, where The Nation is talking to Christopher Luxon, and the first kind of topic of conversation is his leadership.
I want to start with you today by talking about leadership, political leadership, because you've been National Party leader now for a year, and yet somehow people still don't feel like they really know you. That is what I hear.
Yeah,
Why is that?
Well, I think it's an interesting one because I think people know what I've done, but they don't necessarily know who I am. And it's partly the way that I came into politics. You know, I've only been there 2 years, and essentially, you know, I arrived, and then, but we went to Christmas, we went to a maiden speech, and then we were in Auckland lockdown, and then I came back and essentially took over the leadership. And so people know what I've done, they don't necessarily know who I am, and that's really the focus of, what I've got to keep working hard at, is people getting to know me, what motivates me, what I care deeply about, which is this country, and making sure it realises all its potential that it's got.
But that does seem like a critical failure for a leader and somebody who wants to become Prime Minister. A year down the track, that is the sort of question mark that's hanging over National and you at the moment.
Look, I disagree. I think, when you take a step back and think about the National Party and the journey that we've been on and where I started and where we are today, we've made tremendous progress. I think, we've actually pulled together a team. We're a unified team. We've got the right people in the right places. We've done a good job last year of actually opposing the government and actually, taking the case and holding them to account. And this year is the third part, which is really articulating our vision and making sure we've got the proposals and the ideas to take the country forward. And so, it's a work in progress, and it's about us continuing to move forward. And that's about me getting to know the New Zealand people, getting to know me, and as well as understanding what we're about.
But we're 4 months into an election year now, and we're still talking about people getting to know you.
Yeah.
Well, that's a function of actually, as I said, I've been leader for just over a year and a bit. As leader of the opposition, you often don't get the same opportunities to actually sort of, for people in the media, for example, to get to know you. But look, I mean, that's happening. I'm yesterday I'm in Thames Coromandel. Day before I was in Cambridge.
The thing about it, though, is that, no one's saying that you shouldn't be going out to these smaller regions doing things. That's not how the country gets to know you as a leader. I think the point is we're 4 months and we're 6 months out from an election, 26 weeks away. And the country right now doesn't know him, doesn't trust him. And I'm only saying that based on the research, and doesn't find him to be a credible leader or potential Prime Minister when you look at the actual polls. No, and it's fascinating to see that he's obviously not going to go, oh yeah, I suck, but But it seems that there's a little bit of absolutely head in the sand about this interview as well.
I mean, he's referencing, of course, what I've done. I've been the CEO of Air New Zealand.
Oh, was he?
Cool.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I know. It's a little known fact. But what he never says is what was Air New Zealand like under his leadership? What did he do? It's never something that's brought up, or at least that I at least haven't seen anything about what he has said about his leadership or what has been said about his leadership at Air New Zealand. So if you're gonna stick your flag in that, tell me more. But it's too late for that.
Yeah, well, that's I think one of the interesting parts about this, that it might be will it be too late? But I don't know. If you were, I do kind of think about it. If it was a business, if your objective was to get XYZ done by the end of the year, and XYZ hadn't been done yet by the end of the year, and you were kind of 6 months off the end of the year, and you weren't any closer. Because there's a point that comes up, and I don't want to be a spoiler here or anything, but there's a point that comes up where the interviewer says blatantly, but your polls are exactly what they were 12 months ago. What are you talking about? We're doing better. Look, let's play another 60 seconds of this as well, because this bit about leadership, we've got 60 seconds to go.
Te Awa Mutu, we're doing public meetings, people coming out, and it's really fantastic. So I think once people get to know me and they know what I'm about and why I want to come here and do this job, that's what it's about.
Well, some people sort of think that you are this arch conservative Christian, and other people think that you are sort of socially progressive, which seems confusing.
Isn't it terrible when you can't pigeonhole someone?
But it's scrambled. Your focus has been in branding and marketing.
Exactly.
And that, to me...
That's actually a really good point. That National hasn't branded him well. I did a podcast today with my comedian for tomorrow, with Nick Rado. It's coming out tomorrow morning. And he talked a lot about it's taken him 18 years to find his brand as a comedian. Like, it's taken him that long to figure it out. And however this is supposed to work, I mean, I'm not saying 12 to 18 months is you'll never do it, but they haven't done it. They haven't branded him as to what he is. And maybe that's why we're seeing these mixed messages like we talked last week, Chewy. I did it on the Thursday night, I think, and then I talked with Debbie Nato-Apaka on the Friday night in a little short kind of special about when he apparently ruled out the Māori Party. And then the story that Debbie tells is she was still on the treadmill doing exercise. They phoned her and said, do you have a response to being ruled out? And before she got off the treadmill, they'd said, oh, don't worry, they've ruled you back in again. It's like, so because he'd said something to a group of farmers that was talking to them, but then he had to change it and say something to the rest of the country to talk to them. So, it's and I'm not worried about the word flip flop, but he hasn't got any branding. He doesn't know who he is, and that. So how if they're going to flip flop in the space of an hour on in out, then how are we supposed to know who this person is?
I mean, the personal branding thing's really interesting. I did a corporate leadership course quite a few years ago now, but one of the exercises that they had us do over the space of a couple of hours was come up with a personal brand for yourself. You write a paragraph of things that you think are important that describe you as a leader, and you condense it down, and you condense it down, and you condense it down until you've got 3 lines that sum up you as a leader and a person and what's important to you. It is literally an exercise that you can do by yourself in an afternoon.
Yeah, right.
And like, I remember when I sat down and did mine, and I was like, oh, Jesus, yeah, okay, that's me down to a T. If you can't do that for yourself and then communicate that to the people that you're trying to convince that you will be an effective leader, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then he talks about building a team, and we've had nothing but scandal and shit fuckery with the team that he's building. Like, I mean, this weekend alone, right? They've got the candidate for Tairi down here with a horrible, sexist, bad taste joke. Did you see that?
Haven't seen that.
No? Okay, so the national candidate from here says he likes his COVID like he likes his women, 19 and easily spread.
Now, see, that should be that person should be gone. Like if Luxon was actually a leader, that person would be gone.
Yeah. So what I want people in the
Are you
chat
serious?
now,
Sorry to interrupt you. Are you serious? That's what he said.
Yes, absolutely. Please, people in the chat, you, Pat, go and look for that story. It literally happened in the last couple of days.
I'm typing in 19 and easily spread. I'm not. What pictures? What am I going to get when I type that in?
Don't do that. Abort. You'll end up on a watch list. No, as you're doing that, I want you to have a mental image of what the national candidate for Tairi, or what used to be known as Dunedin South, that said this thing looks like. I want you to hold that in your head as you search for that story. And then the other candidate that they're dropping into, literally flying in to contest Wellington Central, is a lawyer that's been working in the Middle East for the last 3-4 years. He hasn't even been in the country, but he's the best person that they can find to represent an incredibly diverse area.
Good Lord.
Like Wellington Central. And again, they're just getting white dudes. Again, that's been the consistent criticism, is that they need more diversity and they can't find it.
So just to reiterate, National Party candidate Stephen Jack has removed a crass joke he shared on the crass. That's like, it's just locker room talk. This is just locker room talk. On social media about young women and COVID-19. It said, quote, "I like my COVID like I like my women, 19 and easy to spread." So, and that's him there. So even so
like
he's talking about he's talking about having fucking 19-year-olds easily in his joke. That person there. Mm-hmm. What is he? 55, 60?
Easy.
65? I mean, like, and this is, I mean, I haven't seen this, is all off the fly. Crass posts about young women doesn't reflect Nationals candidate vetting, says Luxon. Well, we all know, Mr. Uffendell, about Nationals candidate vetting and how piss poor it is. But see, what you do now is, if you are a leader, you now sort this out by moving that person on. I was going to say as well, the clip that we're listening to, which we're still listening to, about Luxon's leadership, it's just excuse. It's almost like.
And the third thing I'd say to you is, we just clearly haven't got the appropriate consequences in place for serious offending, like we're seeing here as well. There has to be consequences, youth offending consequences. We know where the consequences of this actually is for them for the rest of their life. You know, really, it's about making sure we've got appropriate consequences. No consequences. We have to have consequences. Consequences as a result. Consequences of crime. Consequences.
Clear set of consequences.
Consequences, and that's what we're saying here, to just enforce some consequences and actually make sure you know where your young person is and that you're actually getting them to school.
Remember, that was in a 9-minute media scrum. So
know where your young person is, because otherwise Uffendell's coming for him.
Shit, or else that guy from Tidy might be coming for them if they're female, from the sounds of things. A fucking awful piece of shit. This has got 25 seconds before we get out of this bit about leadership. Let's keep going on this. But I mean, New Zealand doesn't know him as a leader. The consequences of that are he's rating piss poor in the polls, and he's not trusted as leadership. And I found the clip here. In fact, I'll bring it over. This is the thing from Courier that I was talking about, Chewy. Mm-hmm. So this is part of what their polling was. Which party is best at economy? People reckon it's hilarious that they say economy and they reckon national, but they say jobs and they reckon Labour. I don't quite know how those two things spin off like that. But health, they say Labour. Leadership, significantly Labour over national. That's what I was saying based around this one. Jobs, national, and law and order. People have got it's 3-3. So it's, I guess, just goes to show the closeness of what's going on right now. But
and I'll say that for the economy, that is not borne out by any other statistic ever. That's just the vibe of the people that they've polled. That is the thing that that's a gimme for them, that people think that they're good at the economy. It's not borne out by fact.
Yeah. All right, 25 seconds of this to go.
Yeah, it's sort of a confusing picture in the minds of voters, wherever they are.
His branding.
Look, I don't think it is. I think,
I don't think it is.
People who want to try and pigeonhole me as a certain type of, whether it's around faith or other things, and I've tried to explain what that's about and how that fits into everything. But for me, I'm just fixated on solving problems and actually getting things done, and that's what my career has been about. That's what my leadership experience has been about, actually getting things turned around and getting results for people.
See, the thing that, I mean, not to bang on too much about it, but if I was to believe that he's about solving problems, he has a problem at the moment that no one knows what he is, and he can't solve that. Now, I know he's probably talking about economical problems or societal problems, but you know, you trust me with the pennies, you'll trust me with the pounds. You do the little things well, we'll trust you with the big things. The little thing is at the moment, nobody knows who he is. He has a problem with his, you know, I don't mean appearance as in physical, but the way that people see him or don't see him. They can't solve that. So if they can't solve that problem, what faith do we have in them to solve any of the other problems?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is, he's saying that people don't know who he is. I think that the polls are telling you that they do. They just don't like what they're seeing.
Yep.
You know, we keep coming back to that absolutely devastating one about his authenticity or trustworthiness. You know, that's the kiss of death as far as I'm concerned. The moment that came out, I was like, cool, someone's going to roll him.
So maybe what the truth is, and I say this a lot, the Maya Angelou comment, you know, that when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. Maybe the polls are telling them that, like you're saying, it's exactly what New Zealand think, and it's exactly who they think he is. Now, if I'm going to be fair, I'd say whether that's true or not on the end of that, but I mean, perception, we all know that politics and that in voting is perception, and the perception is, at the moment, not good for Christopher Luxon. Now, does that mean they'll lose? Nope. It's 50-50 at the moment, very, very much so. But there's a question that I don't think I've gotten this, and News Hub or the Nation asks him, why aren't you doing better? And of course the answer is, we're doing pretty well. We're doing pretty well compared to last year. But that's the other thing. If really the economy is so bad, and if the squeezed middle, and if the cost of living crisis, and if the woke tards are all making up new words for the cabbages and all that kind of stuff, if it's all that bad, why aren't they on 60%?
Yeah.
Why is it so close?
Especially, like, there's also a difference, I think, when it comes to an election like this one is I think shaping up to be.
Yep.
Is, are you getting votes from people that think National will do a better job, or are you getting votes because people think that Labor is doing a bad one?
Yeah, well, that often happens. Often governments get voted out, not opposition.
Exactly.
Get voted.
So I think for people like us that are in this position of going, maybe being a little bit too complacent and saying, like, National are doing a shit job at this, there's no way that they will win. I think that's a real danger for people like us to get maybe a little bit complacent.
Yeah, look, and that's why I'm saying it's 50-50. Sorry, I laughed while you were talking. It was because Gary's one of the greatest comments of all time. Can't win an election if your only talent is not being Jeff Collins. Okay, let's go on to this, because they continue to talk about leadership and the way the public perceives Christopher Luxon, specifically around polling. Who is Christopher Luxon?
But I want to just come back for a moment to this question of, the narrative around who is Christopher Luxon. I think voters are picking up on it. Your preferred Prime Minister rankings are back to where they started when you took over the party. Right now, I think you're around 17%. So this sort of inability to connect with voters is having an impact, or this question mark is having an impact, isn't it? You can't be happy with 17%.
Look, I just know I've got more work to do. I keep describing it. It's a massive job interview with the New Zealand people, and I get a job offer or an employment offer on October 14th if I do my job right.
Or not.
But don't underestimate, the way and the speed by which I've come through to the leadership as well.
Excuses.
Has meant that people haven't known me for 4 to 6 to 10 years.
Excuses.
Actually seen me in other roles and actually got a sense of who is this guy and what he's about.
Yeah.
I think that is happening. I mean, people are getting that sense as I move around the country about what motivates me. Why is this guy? The question I get asked the most each and every day is, look, you seem like a nice guy. You've got a great family. You had an awesome career. Why on earth have you left it all to come to politics?
Well.
And the answer is really simple. It is genuinely, I could do lots of things, but the point is I choose to do this job. I want to do this job because I really want every Kiwi flourishing. I want this country realising its potential.
Well, if I look at John Key in the equivalent position at this exact time in the election cycle in 2008, he was ahead of Helen Clark in preferred Prime Minister rankings on a stratospheric 48%. His story and your story are very different, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, the situations are very different as well. And so the scenario that I think is more relevant to, as I looked at the job that I have ahead of me as leader of the National Party,
I don't know if they are.
Was more about what David...
Why are they so different?
Not at all.
End of the 2008 financial crisis, there was all these economical issues that the opposition, Clark was in until 2008, 2009, 2008. Mm-hmm. All these same economy issues were out there. Inflation was going up, unemployment was going up. They're all out there. So why is it so different? I don't want to pick holes in the interview because it's good, but I sometimes sit back and go, but what about this question? But what about this question? But why do you think it's different, Mr. Luxon? What is it specifically?
I think if we're talking about leadership too, they're comparing Key to Helen Clark. Helen Clark wasn't popular at that point. As a lefty, I did not like Helen Clark at that point. And then John Key, for all of his faults, had more personality, was as we've said before, more likable.
But so this is even more condemning. I need to bring us back into full screen for this. This is even more condemning. Jacinda Ardern was not likable, yet he still couldn't do what Key did. So Helen Clark wasn't likable, wasn't popular. John Key flourished. Jacinda Ardern wasn't popular. Christopher Luxon couldn't do anything with it. Yeah. Chippy comes in and let's be honest, got a bump because of the cyclone and that sort of thing and showed leadership, but has not had any opportunity to flourish in it. Now, I think that people also vote based on perception, based on backing winners, and probably John Key being 40 to 50% of the polls. People are like, well, the nation wants this guy in, so let's support him. I'm not suggesting again that means they're not going to get in, but the nation looks at 17% and went, well, why do 85%, why do 8 out of 10 New Zealanders not want this guy in? Yeah. Why? What's going on here? And I
feel
think
the need to jump in and say if you vote in the election because of that, that's a terrible strategy. Please don't do that. But human nature is, yes, I want to back a winner.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that's reality. I don't disagree with you that it's piss poor way of doing it, but it's also a reality. Right, this is still talking about who is Christopher Luxon. There's got about 40 seconds to go.
Cameron experience in the UK rather than what John Key experienced here in New Zealand.
Or Don Brash, perhaps, rebuilding phase?
There was a massive rebuild that had happened already in the National Party after a catastrophic failure in 2002. You actually had a period of, a huge success and then failure. That's a normal cycle that we see in political parties. Think about what Blair had to do with the Labour Party. Think about what David Cameron had to do with the Conservatives, Harper with the Canadian Conservatives.
I think 21%
actually what happened with the National Party in 2002.
Yeah, but you're sitting on 17%. It's not fast enough, is what I'm saying.
Well, it's pretty good compared to where we were a year ago.
Well,
and what we're needing to do is make sure that we continue to build that story.
Actually, it's at the same point. Your preferred Prime Minister ratings are at the same point as a year
Running
ago.
out of time.
What I'm saying to you is, and as I've said to you, we've got a lot of work to do as a party, but also for me to get to know the New Zealand people and them to get to know me.
And that comes back to that point, when are you going to get to know New Zealand people, February of next year?
What a terrible thing to say so close to the election. Well, we've got a lot of work to do. People don't know who the fuck I am.
Yeah.
That's just,
let's go straight into the next clip. The polling, this is one of the things that she did very well. She did very well, the host, I should say. And sorry, her name's popped out of my head. I apologise. He, as any politician would, to be fair, he starts talking about how terrible the other party is, right? And she's very, very good at pulling him back in the track. And I wonder, I'm interested here as to why he stops. Someone like Winston Peters wouldn't stop. We just keep talking and keep doing it. I don't know whether, and I'm just being perhaps generous here, he's respectful. I don't know whether it's that he doesn't have that kind of killer instinct. I don't know whether it's his Christian faith and it's like, well, respect women, whatever it is. But when she says, no, he stops. Now, we give him credit for that. Don't know how it means politically for that, but she's pretty good. I mean, she's very good. She's amazing, actually. And forget my bias, but let's just say at pulling this politician back onto track to the answers she wants to get. And then she starts talking about the policies that National is putting out there, because he talks about putting a lot of policies out there, having not working in the polls. So there's policies going out, but they're not moving the needle, I think is what she'd said previous to this.
Let's be clear about what's happening in this country.
Well, let's be clear about what's happening with you and your policy in the party. That's what I'm focused on.
Let me step you back through to that, though, because
I'd
what
like
we're
to step
saying...
forward to the answering of this sort of question.
It's very
which is
good.
That
yeah.
These policies so far have not punctured the bubble. You have not seized, you have not seized the sort of momentum, if you like. Right now, Chris Hipkins and the government have the momentum.
I disagree with you strongly.
Okay,
You've seen recent polls even this week. I mean, I know you're...
Do you hear what's happened there? He slipped up. Because a few minutes ago, he was like saying, we don't look at the polls don't really matter. But this time he was just talking about, and you watch, he checks himself before he wrecks himself. He pulls it back straight away because he realises he can't talk about polls because he just said we don't look at polls.
Have not punctured the bubble. You have not seized, you have not seized the sort of momentum.
You watch him pull it back.
Right now, Chris Hipkins and the government have the momentum.
I disagree with you strongly.
Okay,
You've seen recent polls even this week. I mean, I know you're obsessed on the polls. Honestly, the reason
we've spent a lot of money on polls.
Relaxed about it all is because I go back and look at what pundits and commentators wrote and said about me 6 months ago, 12
But they're
months
not
ago,
polls. This is something else.
And
Pundits and commentators are not what we're talking about.
Today,
we're talking about scientific polls.
They wrote
what
us
they're
off for
saying.
23, no chance ever.
Not they're saying that scientific polls are right all the time. They can be wrong. But the example he was given wasn't about commentators or pundits. It was about polls done. So there's a difference there.
Terrible time to take over the leadership of the National Party, all that sort of stuff. So I don't really, I'm informed about that, but I'm not consumed by that. What I am ruthlessly focused on is outcomes and getting outcomes for the New Zealand people. And so I disagree with you. I think what they want is solutions to problems. And what we've seen from this government is a lot of solutions in search of problems. It's one of the things I noticed coming into politics, very poor problem definition, and therefore what's the practical, pragmatic solution to deliver against that? Education. Problem, big problem.
Yeah.
How do we have 50% of our kids going to high school not where they need to be? How do we have 65%
we know
of
that.
15-year-olds failing maths, reading and writing?
It's thanks to
tests?
John Key.
How do we have 15-year-olds today a year and a half behind where their parents were 20 years ago on maths? How come we've fallen out of the top 10 countries in the world? We have a great...
Because National instituted national standards in 2009. This is the thing, and there's not enough pushback coming from this yet. 15-year-olds in 2009, well, it's 2010, I think it came in. So that's 13 years ago with 2. So they were going into kindy. And then they started school under National's policy of national standards that the education fraternity with one voice said, no, this won't work. This will give you the kinds of outcomes that we are seeing today. So in the formative year, when they were supposed to learn these mathematical equations, learn these mathematical things, learn about reading, learn about writing, National had some tomfuckery with the cycle, with the education system, and they're the ones who are responsible for the 15-year-olds today. Now, this is a very clever, is it a bait and switch, a switch and bait, whichever way that goes? Bait and switch by Christopher Luxon, blaming this government for the outcomes of policies that the national government put in 2009. Because, sorry, forgive me, a 15-year-old today under this government today is the product as a 5-year-old of the national government's policies. That is why there's the issue. Now, I'm okay for Christopher Luxon to say, well, they haven't done anything about it in 6 years. They haven't improved enough. Fine, we'll take that. But first, take responsibility as to why they're here. Then take the plank out of your neighbour's eye. Well, the speck of dust. Take the plank out of your own eye, and then take the speck of dust out of your neighbour's. The plank is national standards fucked a generation for maths and reading and writing. That generation is now going through high school, and you're complaining as to where that generation is academically in maths and reading and writing. It couldn't be clearer. You can criticise the Labour government for not fixing national government's mistakes. Fine, no problem. But you can't blame the academic success of where they are today on the incumbent government because it's based on a system that you set up, not you personally, Mr. Luxon, but your government, your party's government set up 13 years ago. Easy. Do it. Do you think he'll come on and talk to us, Chewy? I don't think so.
No, not at all. Look, I think this is a classic thing, right? There is a big nugget of truth in what he's saying. Like, there are big problems with education. Sure. I don't think there's a single commentator, MP, educator out there that is going to disagree with me on that one. Do we think that National are the ones to fix that. I don't. They've tried to before, and that's what's got us to this position. Nationals are really good at sugar hit policies. Like, they want to feel like they can swoop in and make these changes. Education is not in their wheelhouse, because we get Chris Luxon come in with his bag of his corporate thesaurus that he just throws into a desk fan, and we get gobbledygook like outcomes and all of that sort of stuff come out. That's not how education works. Like, we need a massive review on how we educate people for this world that we live in now.
Yep.
But like all of these policies that National come up with, they look over their shoulder to somewhere 20, 30 years ago and like, we need to return to basic reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Well,
It's
3 hours a day, remember, so therefore there's an hour and a half for everything else.
We send people out of school every day that aren't prepared for the world that they live in. Like, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday about this interview, actually, right? And it's like there should be a divergent part in high school of realistically, do you need to take algebra? You know, are you going into physics? Are you heading into university? Or would it be more benefit to teach you how personal finance works, financial literacy works? You know, these are the big questions that they need to look at with education. But we won't do that because we're not going to be here in 3 years.
Man,
you know,
I would love to
they
talk to
just
Christopher
want to
Luxon.
get the stuff that gets them votes. What is their goal? Do they want to fix the problem, or do they want to win the election? If they want to fix the problem, we'd have policy. If they want to win the election, we get buzzwords.
So if our lovely supporters, be you a patron or a viewer or a lurker, that's our 3 tiers, want us to interview Christopher Luxon, we need to get a lot bigger very quickly. Because even though, yes, he is going to meetings with 50 people, if they have a choice between us and, you know, Kerry Woodham on ZB, we know where they're going. But
or the platform.
Yeah, well, we know. Well, the National will go there. They already are.
Yeah.
But that's now in that's the ball's in your court, my friends. For that, that's even away from us, because I would love to have a conversation with them. I've already, you know what I do? I keep records of questions for these people. Something comes up in the media, and I've got logs of questions for people. All of the politicians, and we've heard back from some. Debbie said she'll come back on and do a proper hour-long thing, and Rimmer said he'd come on, believe it or not. For our Friday nighter, but we'll see what happens. You know what? If the closer it is in the polls, the more likely it is that we'll get all of them, because they'll need every vote, and us lunatics down on this end of things, we'll see. Okay, so there's one more clip I want to play, and actually there's more than one more clip. So let's just get into this bit, because do I need to play this? I'm just looking at time.
This whole interview is gold. Like, whether we
play a
cover
bit
it or
of this.
not, I encourage people to go and watch the whole thing. It's really
So,
good.
So this is Christopher Luxon talking about being challenged again about boot camps. And it's a little bit like the thing you're talking about, academia and education. It's like very clearly the reporter says, you know, this has been tried, this has failed, where's your research? And for want of a better word, he is left wanting.
But, you know, when you're doing that, like that policy in particular, is something that the National Party tried.
So boot camps.
It tried under Key in English. It didn't work, and so they dumped it. But you're resurrecting it now.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it's different, and let me talk you through why. So again, following the logic of the problem, what is the problem? You know, we've got a 30% growth in violent crime, 40% growth in retail crime, 55% growth in gangs,
I'm talking
and
about the solution.
a ram rate every 10 hours. So you sit there and go, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of the process of how we get to where we get to. So that's the problem that we've got. That's not utterly unacceptable in New Zealand. That is not a new normal we have to accept. We have to do something about it. So we come back through it, boot camps, or military academies as we prefer to call them. I know you want to call it that. But you look at the evidence there. If you think about the last time, the program you're talking about, much smaller in scale, less comprehensive, you had a 15% reduction in offending. You had a 55% reduction in violent offending.
15% reduction in offending.
55% in violent offending, which is our big problem that we've got to do. So that's one part of it.
50-50 more or less.
But then we take that and we look at what did or didn't work in that program.
Yeah.
The same thing we did on our education policy, what has or hasn't worked in our past.
Yeah.
And what is it that we need
in our past, i.e. 1950?
to fix and add to it. So what we've added to it is actually saying, look, we think our military are some of our best leaders and mentors. We think adding community organisations in with them, which to do with addiction, numeracy, literacy, and then having a community organisation stick with them when they come out is the best way we get to change the trajectory of where those young people's lives are going.
I can see the theory, but I just don't. I think that one of the greatest
almost
powers
there.
that the state has is the ability to separate young people from their families, which is what you're talking about here. And if you are proposing to do that for a year, then surely you need evidence that that is going to work. And right now you do not have the evidence. This is an experiment.
No, every week I'm out with community organisations. Yesterday I was in
Anecdotal now.
Evidence that this works.
I can tell you, we've spoken to so many people.
Anecdotal.
Go talk to community
organisations.
Not facts.
Families.
Well, we're interested in outcomes, and we're interested in breaking patterns and making sure that those young people have an opportunity.
But you don't know what the outcome is going to be. It's wildly experimental.
It's not.
Because you have no idea what the outcome was for those kids who went through those camps under key in English.
Sure, but what we've seen is...
Sure, you have no idea what the outcome for those kids. Sure, and then on to the next talking point. I think we'll leave it there. You get the gist, right? Because there's a couple of commentaries that come along afterwards that I really want us to have a look at as well. And the first one is the nation went out into the street to talk about who is Christopher Luxon to a few people.
They were sharing their thoughts on Christopher Luxon this week.
Maybe a bit too conservative for some people.
He's better than the rest of that party, so yeah.
I don't know a lot about him, to be honest, but he seems pretty friendly.
Oh, I like him. You know, honestly, I don't know much about him at all. To me, he lacks personality, but he's probably all right.
Fairly good job. Yeah, I expect him to be a bit more active in the lead into the election. Yeah.
That's now, dude.
We'll see. Slow start. Slow start.
What's his plans?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a little bit underwhelmed, actually.
Why's that?
Oh, I thought he'd have a lot more to offer, but yeah, it's just kind of same old, same old.
So there you go. There's that. And the last thing I want to play you is Ben Thomas talking about who Luxon is compared to others. Interesting commentary here, and then it goes into a second comment from one of the other commentators, and then we're done with the video. So let's have a quick look.
I think that the comparison to John Key isn't necessarily apt.
Yeah.
John Key was a political superstar. He was a generational phenomenon as a National Party leader. Jacinda Ardern was a generational phenomenon as a Labour Party leader. The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, is not in Jacinda Ardern's league, and Christopher Luxon is not in John Key's league. We've come back down to earth in terms of our political leaders for this election. Look, Luxon did spend a lot of time out of New Zealand, and a lot of his early sort of interviews and discussions referred to overseas experience. But I think, like we took from that interview, he really is kind of getting into the nooks and crannies of New Zealand, the provinces, the small towns, and, I think he's sort of shaping kind of his New Zealand political persona.
We're seeing it in action, Julian.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other issue you had was John Key was able to define himself very easily. He was able to talk about the pain that he could share with other New Zealanders through his upbringing. His inability, Chris Luxon's inability to be able to talk in that way is the reason why people don't understand or know him well enough. He doesn't have the 30-second thing which just deals with it and is done. It feels a little bit like Mitt Romney. He's being defined by other people rather than defining himself. And if he can get that nailed, then we can move on. He hasn't nailed it, and that's why we're still asking simple.
Yeah.
There you go. That was quite a comprehensive deep dive into parts of that conversation, Chewy. You've seen most of that, some of that. What are your thoughts?
Yep. Look, someone needs to roll this guy if they want to crack. I'm sticking with that. Look, I think the boot camp conversation really shows what he relies on. He hasn't got the facts. He's not across the numbers, so he'll rely on anecdotes.
Yeah. People have told me.
And again, we come back to what I said about education. It depends on what his objective is. Is it to solve the problem, or is it to get elected? Because if the problem is we do the boot camps and that'll solve crime, there's a couple of things wrong with that. It's never worked. It's never worked here. It's never worked overseas. So he hasn't got the facts to back that up, that is going to solve the problem. You're going to take kids away from their families for up to a year. you might as well just throw them in prison. But he knows that's not going to play. But being tough on crime is like National being good at the economy is their bread and butter. It's the thing that's got cut through with people. It's a vote winner that we're tough.
It's a bumper
but
sticker.
It's not based up on any sort of thing. If he really wanted to solve the problem, he's not going to solve the problem today or tomorrow in a year's time. What he can do is he can solve the problem in 15 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 5 years' time. He talks about putting these kids into a military-based academy, whatever you want to call it. He's funding the wrong entity. The military's job, that's not, they've been on record. They don't want to do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if he wants to give money and wraparound care to prevent these kids getting worse, to change the direction of their life, there's already those entities. And they've been screaming out for funding for decades.
Yeah.
You get in on their education, you get on wraparound care on their families, you get them on a course earlier. You can't just swoop in at 17 and go, you've done a ram raid, off to the army. It does not work. It never has. They've got nothing to back this up. And if you push on their policy even a little bit, that's what you've got, and all he's got to back it up is anecdotes.
Look, I think that, from someone who sits obviously on the left, we never hide that in this show. If you're a lurker, I want to see the left succeed in the upcoming election. So obviously my commentary here has a bias to it, but I can also take a step back and go, if they just want to have, if they want to get somewhere, this National Party, the branding of Christopher Luxon needs to actually be nailed down. We need to know, the country needs to know who he is, what he stands for. And as the commentator Julian from the Hui said, that Key could do it in 30 seconds and relate in 30 seconds and explain his upbringing in 30 seconds. Mike Williams said a couple of weeks ago on this show, actually, I think it was this show, that one of the problems when the Labour Party gets too many donations is it makes them appear distant from the common man. In other words, too many donations, too much money in the Labour Party coffers can be seen as a bad thing because all of a sudden they've got all the money in the world to do what they want. Grafting and grinding is a better look for the supporters of Labour, for the Labour Party. And I think you could apply that perhaps to anyone who has money. I don't have a problem with having money. Trust me, I'm in search of it myself. But how to make yourself relatable, accessible, as a real human being, not to have to worry, people understand that the power bill sometimes is hard to pay. John Key could do that with his upbringing. Luxon cannot, and that's one of his problems at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird question. If you walked up to someone and go, hey, name a CEO of Air New Zealand, right? People might mention Chris Luxon because he's the leader of the opposition now, but you couldn't name him as being the CEO of Air New Zealand at the time. People had a different vibe when it came to Rob Fyfe.
Yeah, for
who
sure.
was a transformational leader for Air New Zealand, who made a lot of changes. And then Luxon replaced him and comes in and kind of reaps the benefit. And all he had to do was just not make it worse. But he was behind a lot of layoffs. Just you talk to people that worked at Air New Zealand at that time, I think their commentary is illuminating.
Yeah. All right. Hey, listen, if you want to get some text ready, we'll do that. I just want to do this super quick because we said we would, is talking about where COVID's at the moment, because there's been about a 15% increase in the last week, and that's of cases that have been set out. We know in this show we've been talking about it. I had I've had both of my children having COVID in the last, both of my children at home, in the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks. And I knew last week when I added up, I think 7 people in Dunedin that I knew personally, like they're directly linked to me who had COVID, so we knew it was around. One expert has said that New Zealand was now facing a fourth wave of COVID-19. This is from today. Professor Michael Baker said the case numbers were not spiking as in past waves, but that could be because of underreporting of testing and positive cases. Hospitalisations were more reliable guide, Baker said, and shown a distinct rise in the number of people being admitted with COVID infection. Numbers have been rising for 7 or 8 weeks. We've seen a doubling of hospitalisations over that time. That's quite significant. It means more than 10,000 people winding up in hospital over a year and displacing other things. Dr. David Welch, Senior Lecturer in Computational Evolution at the University of Auckland, said the rise in cases was likely to be driven by waning immunity and possibly by the beginning of the winter flu season. He expected cases to keep rising and not reach peaks of the previous waves, largely because of increased levels of immunity among the population and widespread vaccination. He said newly available bivalent vaccines targeted the current variants of COVID, so there's a real opportunity to significantly reduce your chances of getting very sick by getting that vaccine now. Go and get the vaccination, people. Let's just be very blunt about it. And I know some of you are following me on Twitter because since the article in the New Zealand Herald came out talking about Chantal Baker using our interview with it, I've been putting up some clips on most days. But this is a good time to go and get the vaccine, especially the bivalent one. I think, I know, Chewy, you've got yours booked in. I haven't got mine because I had COVID.
I got mine
December.
on Thursday.
I have to wait. Are you magnetic yet, out of interest? I have to wait until at least May, which I'll be getting mine then. And other than that, it's the best way. I mean, look, I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not going to be a hypocrite, but masks and vaccines is still the best way of protecting yourself. If you want to protect yourself, most people don't, especially with a mask at the moment. But it's out there. It's going to spike if you're someone. The thing I love about talking to Anna Brooks is she always talks about the vulnerable, right? Yeah. And no matter what happens, it's the vulnerable that get fucked over most of all. And I think that it's a really important thing for us to not lose that idea that if we don't catch it, then we don't pass it on. Or if we are less likely to catch it, then we aren't going to pass it on. So we've kind of moved away from that model in 2020 where everyone wanted to look after Nana and Granddad. But now, you know, once all the restrictions come off and once we ease up even more, it's the absolute vulnerable who have had to be hidden away for the past 2 or 3 years will have to be even more so hidden away. And I think they should still be part of our thought process, Joey.
Yep, 100%. David in the chat raises a good point. Compare the number of COVID deaths to the New Zealand road toll, then consider the effort, police, manpower, and the mandates used to reduce that road toll.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Really, really good point.
Although there's also going to be, I'm not negating that I agree, but I'm assuming David isn't saying, I know he's not saying there's not enough being done for, effort, for example, for COVID, because there's been hundreds of millions of dollars and effort put into also helping with COVID as well. But yes, in the eyes of the people, that's a very helpful analogy, comparison.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else in the text before we head off?
Oh, I started so many things, but we just didn't have time. I'd have to wade back through all of these. Look, Kim raises a good point about the boot camps. As a specialist clinician in psychological trauma, this is complete bullshit. There's no evidence that would support boot camps to prevent offending. And that's absolutely right. We know this. It's not an experimental program. It's been tried. They have evidence. It doesn't work. So don't do it again. Unless you're trying to buy votes, which is exactly what he's doing.
Said BS, didn't say bullshit. You inserted that into there.
Editorial. Simon says, I'm guessing this man wants to waste our military's time becoming a babysitting service. Yes.
Well, the military doesn't want to do it. That's the other thing. It's like it's like if I was running for office and I was going to go, all Shell petrol stations from now on will have someone on the forecourt to fill up your car. What? You can't make that call. You know what I mean?
Army doesn't want to do it, doesn't lead to any positive results. Red meat for voters, though.
Yeah. But this is, I was just thinking about this as we were doing it. Like, key is getting around to these groups of 50 or 80 or 100 people. I wouldn't be surprised. See, this is the mistake. I know, I'm just thinking of this tonight, so this is not going to be a fully formed opinion, as is most of the things that come out of my mouth, is that he's preaching to the choir in those meetings of 50 people. It's actually, as a political, and look, I'm not about helping out the party, but we are about commenting on politics. And actually, what you want to do is be grabbing that 10% either side of centre. They're your target. Because going to meet up with farmers in wherever, South Waikato, they're yours. You've already got them. You know, they're not going anywhere. Actually, what political parties should be doing is, and especially when it's as close as this, is coming on shows like this and talking to the 1% of people that you don't have, that you need to bring across. Because you got the farmers. You know what I'm saying? I just thought about that when I thought about in the interview when he said, I'm going to here and I'm going to there and I'm going to here. And I was like, they're all pretty conservative regions you're going to. Are you going to South Auckland? Are you going to the church hall in Mangere? You know, what are you doing there?
Yeah, they're putting in front of safe.
Yeah,
voters,
but that's not going to.
It's not going to help.
That's not going to get you an extra
unless you're
2.
worried about losing your base.
That's not going to get you an extra 2% in the polls, which is probably what is going to be the difference for this upcoming election. 2% either way is going to win it.
But is it more about not losing votes rather than gaining it?
Maybe.
Is that what they're worried about? Is losing even more?
It could also be. It could also be that the media is with them. So whilst they're meeting with 50 farmers, they're speaking through the cameras to the rest of the people. That could be part of the plan.
Peter here says, "I see a struggling sales rep unable to cope with objections." As a salesperson, yes, I did enjoy that comment. 100%. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, team. Good to have you on board tonight. I think we've got a normal week, haven't we? No public holidays this week? I don't think so. There have been public holidays up the wazoo. Thank you for being a part of us. If you can see on the bottom of the screen right now, we turn this into an audio podcast every single night. So basically I get it from here and I put it straight onto Apple iTunes and Spotify. If you aren't already subscribed, especially to Apple, even though, they may not be, massive in one area, that people pay attention to the Apple charts. If we can get ourselves up the Apple charts, that will help us to get people like Christopher Luxon. That'll help us to get other people on board. I listened to the Diary of a CEO. I can't remember what the guy's name is. It's a British guy. He has a lot of amazing guests coming on. And he just, at the end of his clip, he just goes, support us, do this. The bigger we are, the bigger the guests we get. And I'm like, that's a pretty blunt, sort of thing to say. So if you're not subscribed to our, especially Apple podcast yet, which is just this show. In fact, when I cock it up on this show, that's actually an edited version. Cutting out all the, you can't hear me. What? My audio is not playing. That's all cut out of the audio podcast. So if you would consider it, that's another way you can support us. Won't cost you anything. Go and subscribe to it. And when you see them downloading, have a bit of a listen to it. That'll help us in the charts. That'll help us get guests. That'll help us provide more content for you guys. It's a win-win-win, Chewy. It's a win-win-win.
That's a lot of wins.
It is. All right, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Thanks for joining us tonight. Big Hairy News. We'll see you next time. Hooroo.